is the Bearcast, presented by Bird Culture Ford. Bird Culture Ford has been in Waco since 1936. Ford is the #1 selling truck in Texas 43 years running. The Bearcast is also presented by WellMed Medical Management and USMD Health System Dallas. Here's Craig Smoke and Grayson Grundhafer.
What's up, everybody? Welcome into another edition of the Bearcast on Sic'Em365.com. I'm Craig Smoke, Sic'Em365 writer, radio host, joined as always by Grayson Grundhafer, director of broadcasting, also team and recruiting reporter for Sic'Em365. Armstrong Sims behind the scenes as well, producing, and we have a lot to discuss this week. The start of spring football, the end of basketball, and we'll get into both of those. But Grayson, before we do get into the details, how are we doing this week?
I mean, today's a great day because it's spring football. I mean, it doesn't get much better than that outside of fall camp and the beginning of the season. So I'm really excited about that. But my goodness, I mean, this was a rough weekend. This was a rough weekend for all Baylor sports. I mean, it just seemed like every time I got an email or every time I looked at a score, it was just a loss. I mean, and basketball, of course, I mean, just a great run this year, but a really tough ending for both teams. And so, yeah, I know we're going to get into that, but it's kind of a sweet and sour Tuesday, I would say.
Yeah, it was a rough weekend, and it's now over, so it's time to move on. But we do need to rehash it and talk about it before we can. And maybe some people have already done that, but we're here to do that for you if you haven't, and here to do that ourselves. Because I, for one, am not going to, want to rehash this too much more after today because, it's not a fun thing to talk about, quite frankly. And let's get into it. I mean, we'll start off with basketball and get into football and a spring preview as the show moves along here. The Baylor men and women both knocked out in the round of 32, and for the Baylor men, a #1 overall seed, one of just 4 teams to have that #1 next to their name and, defending national champion, all that's fantastic, but they draw a tough team there in North Carolina in the second round. You knew it was going to be a rough matchup potentially because Carolina was starting to play really well. They had that big win over Duke just a couple weeks before. And, they got some size, and they didn't have a lot of depth, just like Baylor, but they did have some size, and they had a lot more than that on Saturday as they nearly blew the Bears out of the gym in the first half of the game. Baylor makes a valiant comeback, but in the end, 93-86, overtime loss to the Tar Heels in Fort Worth. North Carolina moves on to the Sweet 16. Baylor's season ends, and Grayson, they made a go of it. Certainly got a little bit of help from the Zebras along the way. But, there was plenty of games this weekend where officiating was a hot topic, and I don't want to dwell on that part of it. Not because it was favorable for them, but just because it's just, I don't know, it doesn't matter in the end. They didn't win the game. So I think the more important thing is the fact that they did not play so well in the first half, kind of dug themselves a hole, and then, give them a lot of credit for trying to fight back the way that they did, but ultimately just not enough. And, there's worse teams to lose to in the round of 32, but it is a very abrupt exit in many ways, and just kind of, I don't know, hard to believe that just this quickly the season's over with.
Yeah, and I mean, the officiating was really interesting. I felt like North Carolina got mostly all of the timely calls, but Baylor got the biggest call, obviously, with the Brady Manick thing. I mean, honestly, everyone I've been hearing from, everyone that I've been kind of listening to on podcasts, they think it was on purpose. And I mean, natural movement of the elbow does not go upwards. And his elbow definitely went upwards and hit Jeremy Sohan in the face. And Jeremy was being extremely frustrating for North Carolina, I think, the entire day. I mean, it started off with him and Baycott, their legs getting tangled up. And, Jeremy was flopping a little bit a couple times, which is part of the game. And so I think he was frustrating people. And I think that led to the Manick play. And I mean, people can say what they will, but it looked pretty on purpose to me. But anyways, Brady Manick was absolutely ridiculous in this game, and it's kind of becoming a consistent theme in this tournament. Guys who leave conferences and go to another conference and then play a team from their former conference, those guys have been really, really good against their former conference. It's been so interesting to see that. Kalsher for Iowa State put on an absolute show in their round of 32 game against a Big Ten school, and he's from the Big Ten. So there's just been a lot of kind of signs of that, which has been really interesting. Manek, 28 minutes, had 26 points. There was a stretch in there where he was looking like Larry Bird. I mean, the dude was making everything. And at the beginning of the game, RJ Davis was making everything. And I was just sitting there going, man, is this team ever going to miss? I mean, seriously, are they ever going to miss? And is Baylor going to play any defense? Are they going to do anything about this? And they simply did not do anything to stop the Tar Heels. The only difference in the second half was Baylor started scoring the basketball more. But Craig, I think this is an important question for you. If I told you that Baylor was going to shoot 24 more shots in this game and shoot 27 free throws and have 10 less turnovers, would you have said that there was any chance they were losing that game?
No, probably not.
Yeah, and I mean that's kind of the most crazy stat of the whole day is North Carolina shot the ball 57 times, Baylor shot the ball 81 times. The difference was Baylor shot 35% from the floor and North Carolina shot a scorching 49%. The three balls were a difference as well. Carolina 11 of 25, Baylor 9 of 37. I feel very confident in saying that if LJ Cryer and Jonathan Tchamwa-Tchatchoua played in this game, Baylor probably beats this team by 20. I feel very confident in saying that. Baylor could not get open looks at times, and when they did, guys were not making shots. Adam Flagler, 3 of 11 from 3. That's pretty mediocre for him. James Akinjo, his problem the whole year, and what we said had to change in the tournament was he'd have to make 3-point shots. He was 1 of 7 in this game. Now, he did score 20 points. Flagler scored 27, but Flagler shot the ball 25 times and Akinjo shot it 20 times. So you add all that up, it was an inefficient day on the offensive side. This team did not play very good defense against a solid North Carolina squad, and they got sent home for it. But it was one of the most amazing comebacks I've ever seen.
Yeah, it was an incredible comeback. I mean, it really was NCAA record, right, for most points down to come back. And, I mean, forced overtime is incredible. And to think that they nearly won that game, I mean, I can't even imagine what the reaction would have been like had they been able to pull it off. But unfortunately, it was not enough. And, just not enough offensively, which, is just kind of something that once LJ Cryer went down and, it was kind of like everybody was waiting for him to be the scorer. And it's like, no, guys, he's might not come back, and he never did, really. I mean, he sparingly a couple of times, but, I mean, not at all in this tournament, not at all the last couple of weeks. And, that ended up killing them, not having, just a consistent scorer. And, give North Carolina a lot of credit. They're playing good basketball right now, but I agree with you. A healthy Baylor roster beats these guys. Even if they are fully healthy, I feel like Baylor beats these guys, but just with what they didn't have available and what they didn't have going their way on Saturday, it just resulted in, an unexpected loss, I think, for most people. Not that, there weren't some who felt, here's North Carolina, this is going to be tough. There were plenty of those people as well. So in the end, those feelings were warranted as North Carolina does get the victory, and they now move on to the Sweet 16. And for the Bears, they get to sit back and watch, some other Big 12 teams now potentially go and win a national title, whether it be Kansas or Texas Tech or Iowa State. Who else is in there? TCU lost and Texas lost. Those three. But
Iowa State's not winning a national championship.
No, but they got farther than Baylor, so I'm not going to laugh at them right now because, they're still playing. But
it's the tournament. St. Peter's got further than Baylor.
I know, man, but I'm just saying they're in the Sweet 16, so they got a shot at it. Baylor doesn't have a shot. They're at home. I know what you're saying, though, but they're still alive, so I'm going to not try to poo-poo on them too much. But just a bad loss for the Bears.
Yeah, and I mean the Big 12 started off so hot in that first weekend and then, cooled down significantly, but it's crazy. Baylor had a chance to win their game. TCU had a great chance to win their game. I mean, Texas was in it late against Purdue as well. I mean, all these Big 12 teams really showed up and played extremely hard, and I do think that Kansas has an opportunity to make a run in this tournament. I think they're probably going to make the Final Four. Their region has really opened up for them. The other teams, I don't know. I think Tech's probably going to lose to Duke this weekend. I don't even know who Iowa State's playing, but I would guess that they're probably going to lose as well. I'm trying to think, do you know who Iowa State has coming up on their schedule? No, yeah. I mean, that's kind of where I'm at with it, though. I think that it's going to be one team left when you get to the Elite Eight and Final Four, and I think that's kind of where it's going to be at, even though the Big 12 had such a great year and such a great first round. It might end up in being only one team in the Elite Eight.
Trying to find the Iowa State deal here. Yeah, Miami. That's who they play.
Okay, that's a winnable game.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's a 10-11, so that's about as open as it's going to get. That's a good potential opportunity for them. So, yeah, I mean, they've got a shot to perhaps get to the Elite Eight with a win over Miami. It's entirely possible. So, say what you want, but if they're sitting there at the end of the year after what they did last year and a new coach comes in, they're already winning. This is already an incredible season for them, and they might get to the Elite Eight. So, that's a big deal for Iowa State basketball. But for Baylor now, that wasn't the only whammy they faced this weekend because shortly after, I guess a day later after the loss to North Carolina, which was pretty tough to swallow, you knew that they were going to have to rework this roster, which we'll have to talk about, until decisions are made. But the big news, obviously, Jerome Tang, longtime Scott Drew assistant, Baylor assistant, after nearly 2 decades in Waco, headed to become the new head coach at Kansas State because now the Big 12 just wants to basically grab Baylor coaches and repeat what's going on in Waco where they are. So we're going to see Joey McGuire out at Tech in football, and now we're going to see Jerome Tang in basketball as the head coach of the Kansas State Wildcats, just making a tough Big 12 that much tougher, but obviously a big change for Scott Drew coming up as well. He's not bulletproof when it comes to losing coaches. There's a lot of head coaches out there right now that are, formerly of the Baylor staff and Scott Drew staff, and they're doing well for themselves. And now hopefully Jerome Tang will be one of those to a certain extent. Don't want him winning Big 12 titles because that means Baylor's not winning Big 12 titles, but the Scott Drew coaching tree is growing. This is a branch that's been growing for a really long time now, and it was only a matter of time before it, branched off on its own, and that's what we're seeing now with Jerome Tang. Who he could potentially take with him, we have no idea, and then we'll get to the roster here in a moment. But changing of the guard in a way with the move of Jerome Tang to Manhattan.
Yeah, and he's been such a staple to this Baylor program. And everything that I've seen, and I agree with this, I mean, Baylor fans are so happy for him. I mean, this is such an amazing opportunity for him. He finally decided to take that jump. He's been in line for a lot of the mid-major jobs, but I think he really wanted to wait till it was a Power 5 job that he truly believed in. And it just was the right time, I think, for Jerome to make that move. And I'm excited for him. Yeah, Baylor's going to have to revamp some things. Jerome was such a vital part of their recruiting efforts. The good news for Baylor, though, is they have a lot to sell on their recruiting trail. I mean, what they've done over the last 3 years, what they're going to do next year, this program is trending in the right direction. And while Tang is a big loss, I do think that they're going to be able to make up with it. They got Alvin Brooks, John Jacobs, Jared Nunes. I think those 3 guys are going to be more than capable of filling in for what Jerome Tang did. But I just want to thank him. I'm very excited for what he's going to do at Kansas State. And I think it's a perfect fit for Jerome Tang.
Yeah, he waited a long time and, had opportunities, I'm sure many that we're not aware of, and just waited. And I think, now is a good time for him. I mean, nearly 20 years as an assistant. I mean, I don't know how much more he's going to learn at this point before being ready to coach his own program. I think he's been ready, and I think he was smart to, not just go grab the very first opportunity that was out there. He got a good job in the Big 12 in a tough conference. So that is a loss for Scott Drew and the Baylor men. But again, they've lost coaches before. They've seen those guys go off and have successes, and it hasn't hurt them at all. And hopefully that remains the case with Jerome Tang as well. But one thing you're going to have to figure out is who's on this roster next year. I mean, we know some names that will be back, but we don't know the names yet that will not be back. And when you're looking at that, you're looking at is Flo Thamba back? Is James Akinjo back? Matthew Meyer, I'm banking he's gone, but is LJ Cryer back? Is Adam Flagler back? Is Jonathan Chama-Chachua back? Is Jeremy Sohan back? Is Kendall Brown back? I mean, that's like 7 guys there that you can honestly ask, like, will they be back? And could be injury, could be NBA, could be whatever. But, I mean, that's a good chunk of your roster. I mean, you know that you're going to have your Langston Loves and your Dale Bonners, and, you're going to have some other guys returning to the fold, Jordan Turner, Zach Loveday. But, I mean, that's a lot of unproven young players right there. So just your thoughts on this Baylor roster now moving forward.
Yeah, and it looks like Everyday John might not be back for next year either. So you got to throw that in there as well. And that's due to injury, not because of him going anywhere, but just injury. He might not be back next year. And so, man, if you're Flo Thamba, I mean, it's got to be very appealing to see what you did at the end of the year when John wasn't there. And now you get the chance to probably step in next year and be playing those 29 minutes like you did at the end of the year. So I anticipate Flo will be back. I think he's one of the more sure things, along with Adam Flagler. I think Flagler has a lot to prove. And to me, this is just one of those things. We only got to see glimpses of Adam Flagler at full health. He just was not fully healthy the whole year. He wasn't able to come off the court very much at all, had to battle through injury. They didn't have the depth behind him to allow them to preserve him a little bit. I think he's got a lot more to show. And so for that reason, I think he'll be back as well. Everyone else, very much up in the air. I think you can pretty safely say that Sohan and Brown are probably going to go. I think Sohan his name is just rising up draft boards like crazy. I think he could end up being a lottery pick. Brown might be a lottery pick just because of his athleticism and the developmental curve that he may have. I mean, the guy's only 19 years old. He's young. He's extremely young. So yeah, those two I think will be gone. Matthew Meyer has basically said he was leaving unless he has a change of heart because of the way the season ended, but I would kind of expect him to move on as well. So that leaves two more decisions, LJ Cryer, James Akinjo. They need one of those guys back. They need one of them back in my mind. And if they can get one of those guys back to mix with Flagler and Keontae George, Flo Thamba at center, then you go out, get the best available stretch four, like a Jeremy Sohan replacement, and potentially one more of those guys. Because if you lose Brown, Sohan, and Meyer, that's 3 6'8" guys who are so versatile. They're going to need to add depth there. So add 2 transfers there, maybe add a guard depending on how things shake out with Akinjo and Cryer, and then go from there. But I've been on record. We talked about this a week ago. I do think next year's team is going to be far better. And if they can have more luck health-wise than this year's team, I think they're going to be the favorite to be the national champions next season.
That's heavy words. I hope you're right. I was just so, I don't even want to call it frustrated because that would indicate that I was like somehow mad at those guys or something. Yeah. But just it was frustrating watching this team. Just like it felt like a Band-Aid was kept coming loose. Every game it's like this guy's not available or that guy's not available or both guys aren't available. And I don't know ultimately what the deal is with LJ Cryer and that injury, but I would welcome a healthy roster next season. That would be great. I know everybody got spoiled last year, but my gosh, this was literally every single week of the season practically after their 17-0 start.
Right, and then you show up at the North Carolina game and you hear the announcers talking about how Kendall Brown and Matthew Meyer are both sick, and you're just like, really?
Yes.
Really? Like
one of those years.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Then turn around and then your longtime assistant leaves and now, we await these NBA decisions. But it'll be great for some of these guys. More guys going to the pros to add to the Davion Mitchells, and those guys will be great for the program. And, just turning over a new leaf and the Keontae George is now coming up and coming in and some of these other guys that I just riffed off of the roster, the younger players who maybe haven't seen as much time. It's their time now. And it'll be a very interesting offseason for Baylor men's basketball, that's for sure. But they bow out in the round of 32.
Right, and Craig, I did want to draw one parallel to Villanova from 2016, 17, 18. Just one parallel. They won a national championship in 16, lost in the second round in 17, went right back and won the national championship in 18. I could see that happening for the Baylor program heading into next year.
Elsewhere, Baylor women's basketball. Wow. At home in the second round, hosting a Cinderella South Dakota team who had gotten a big win in the first round. A 10 seed versus a 2 seed, and the 2 seeds at home, and you would think that would, turn into ultimately a trip to the Sweet 16 for the Baylor women, but instead it turns into a blowout on their home court, and the final score only 14 points, 61-47. May not seem like a blowout, but it was not ever really even all that close. The South Dakota run that started early, continued on throughout the game. Their shooting and just everything. The Bears looked listless. They looked like they were not geared up to play, and I'm not sure what exactly happened there, why there was a lack of energy, and especially late in the game when there wasn't that big of a lead to chip into and an opportunity still to win that game, you would have thought that it was like the first quarter of an exhibition. It was the wildest thing, just no urgency. So, yeah, down goes Baylor women's basketball on their home court in the round of 32, 61-47. On Sunday, and basketball season as a whole is over because of the loss there after the men fell on Saturday. So Nikki Collins' first year's in the books. They got a regular season championship, and they got a lot of wins, and I think they made some steps forward, but I do think they're going to have to reevaluate what exactly happened on Sunday because that just was not the type of showing I think anybody expected from a team with a chance to go to the Sweet 16 and playing at home. With that opportunity on the line.
16-4 in the first quarter.
Yeah.
What in the world?
It's not even that it was 16-4. It's that they had 4.
Right.
Because I saw people going, man, there's an 11-point lead. And I'm like, who cares? An 11-point lead, in the first quarter is not insurmountable. I kept seeing that. And I'm like, why are people pointing to that like that was some mountain that they had to climb? It's 11 points.
Yeah.
Play defense and get some buckets and you chip away. That means nothing.
4 points means
4 points though.
Score.
Yeah.
It just was. I could not believe that first quarter. What I was seeing out of this team, and truthfully, the only person that showed up for this game was Queen Egbo. 24 minutes, 6 of 7 from the floor, 13.7 rebounds. She was very solid in this game. She had turnovers, but she was very active and played really hard. NaLyssa Smith, this is a really tough way to end your Baylor career. The year she's had, she was in foul trouble. She, just was not as active as I think everyone was hoping she would be. This really left a bad taste in my mouth. And I know the guards were a huge problem, and they were the guards point blank were going to take this team as far as they could. As in, NaLyssa Smith thought you were going to get 25 points every single game in the tournament from her for the most part, but then the guards were going to dictate, could they break through to the Final Four? Could they get to a national championship? And that was an emphatic no on this day, as they shot what am I seeing here? 6 for 23 or 6 for 31? 6 for 31 from the floor were the guards for Baylor. That's just not getting it done. It was a really, really tough day, and just one that I'm sure they all wish they could have back. This is the tournament for you, though, right? Baylor plays South Dakota 10 times on their floor. They probably win 9 out of 10. And on this day, they just did not have it. They did not play well. They weren't able to turn things around when they had a really bad first quarter. They essentially just played even the rest of the game and never were able to rebound from just what was a terrible start. They weren't ready. They weren't focused. They weren't ready to play.
Yeah, I don't know what the lack of energy or focus or whatever it was. Caitlin Bickelson after the game, we weren't underestimating them because it was South Dakota, and that's not who you were expected to play. But, man, it sure felt like it. I would have almost felt better if she had said, yeah, we overlooked them, because at least that would have made sense. The fact that you say you weren't, if that's true, then really what happened? Then what in the world happened? If you weren't overlooking them, then how in the world do you come out that slow? But yeah, South Dakota shot the ball well. Baylor didn't. South Dakota got out the early lead. Baylor was forever trailing, and again, they had opportunities. It wasn't like this was a 25-point. Look, I don't want to hear 11 points early in the game was insurmountable. When the Baylor men are down 20-plus in 10 minutes to go and force overtime, that just now dawned on me that I was actually reading comments talking about how that early lead was insurmountable when the Baylor men in 10 minutes erased a 20-something point deficit and forced overtime. So, yeah, it wasn't just the start. It was the entire way. And, it's just disappointing. A good year. NaLyssa Smith now, however, moves on, so a huge chunk of your team and your focus and your star power is now headed off to the WNBA. As for the rest of the roster, Asbury and Bickle have said they're coming back, but, man, they got to get some scoring. They got to get some variety because they can't just go Nalissa or bust anymore. I mean, they really can't because she's not going to be here. But for real, though, they need to have some options in the case that, their one dimension's not working, like on Saturday, and the shot's not falling. Well, then you see what happens against a South Dakota.
Yeah, they're going to have to hit the transfer portal hard. They need an influx of talent.
Yeah.
I think that's very, very clear. They didn't have depth this year, which is also a problem because when your best players aren't playing well, the best teams have people that come in off the bench and really make plays, and they just didn't have that at all this year. It was starters or bust, basically, the entire season, and it's very hard to win a championship that way. As we saw with the men a year ago, when you have a guy like Adam Flagler coming off your bench, it gives you a very nice scoring punch along with a Flo Thamba. I mean, it's just one of those. Matthew Meyer as well. I mean, that just shows you how loaded you need to be to win a championship, and this women's team needs to get to that point.
Yeah, I definitely think they have to retool some things a bit roster-wise. Now, granted, Colin came in, got to do a little bit of that. And, this first year was tough, as we've well documented. But, now it's time to regroup. They look like they're already out on the recruiting trail yesterday, and they need to be. I mean, really, because, losing to Alyssa, who's your star power next year? Who are your options next year? I mean, there's, some names, but as far as going out and winning another Big 12 title and competing like that, I don't know if I see it right now. I need to see some more added to the roster, and I think most people do. So that's unfortunate, but hey, still got, a Big 12 title to take home, but just a quicker exit than expected. I guess if there was any saving grace, it was the other coach that she would have never, just turned around and lost the very next day. So that at least eliminated some message board chatter that we were going to see over the next couple of weeks. But
thank the Lord.
Yeah, I mean, wasn't rooting for it necessarily, but given the weekend and given the backlash, I was like, well, that kind of seems right that happened, but that was gave me a chuckle last night when I saw that score because I was just like, man, I bet there's some people on the message board that are so mad right now. But yeah, LSU bows out as well. So we'll just sit back and watch what's been a pretty for the women's standards, a pretty wild tournament in terms of upsets and top seeds going down and all that jazz. But,
rarely happens too. That's very, very rare.
Maybe it's a little bit of a changing of the guard, and Texas is still alive in that tournament as well. And who else from the Big 12? I don't know. I'm not quite sure, but I do know I remember seeing Texas win. So they're in a good spot. So there you go. Basketball season is over. Round of 32 for both the Baylor men and the women, and both will need to figure out some things, in the immediate, like who's the staff, who's the players, who's all that. Men obviously have more decisions being made to worry about, but both need to go, revamp these rosters on the recruiting trail.
Definitely need to do that. And I do have some breaking news that's football related before we get into talking about spring football coming up. So breaking news, Corey Coleman is going to the Kansas City Chiefs. He just got signed after being out of the league for a year. He's just 27 years old, and kind of a little bit of fun fact. Do you know which other two former Baylor players are on the Kansas City Chiefs right now?
Yeah, it's basketball, Mark Vital, and I know this. I absolutely know this, and I just am going blank right now.
Josh Gordon.
Yeah.
Josh Gordon.
Yeah.
Also, how about Baylor?
And that's if you count him. That's because I know some people do and some people don't, but yeah.
Yeah, so those three are now all on the same team. But congrats to Corey. Another shot, another opportunity. Going to be tough to find playing time there with Juju and Tyreek Hill, but still very, very happy for him to get another opportunity. And just 27 years old. That's crazy to think about. It feels like so long ago.
It does. He, was a hot ticket. He was a hot name, and then just I don't know what went wrong exactly. It was a combination of things, quite frankly. It was being picked by Cleveland at the time. It was probably having a bit of an ego at the time, and I think that was evident by the player meeting that we saw that preceded his exit from Cleveland very abruptly. And just probably, I'm sure Corey now can handle his business a lot better than Corey back then, and he's got this opportunity, so I hope he takes the most advantage of it and is able to go and do his thing and make his mark in the NFL. But yeah, that was not a name I actually did think about his name a little while ago and just was kind of wondering like what he was up to as I was looking over some NFL stuff. So wild to see him just pop out of the wild like that, but good for him.
Yeah, and I mean, injuries also played a big part in him. The wrist, the ACL.
Yeah.
I mean, he's had some injury problems to go along with everything.
Not running a route tree, I'm not trying to bag
Yeah.
on him, but like it was as much him as it was injuries and, all of that. So I wish him the best and hope he can turn it around after, the very kind of swift exit from the league. Which I guess what was the last team? He was with the Giants there briefly a couple years back. So cool. Baylor's former Blitnikoff winner getting an opportunity as one of the better teams in the league. And now 3 former Baylor players on that roster for KC. All right, so on to football as they kick off spring drills today, as a matter of fact. I wrote a piece on 5 storylines that I'm watching as we start spring ball. I saw somebody post, I think it was Kendall maybe, of like, what are your topics? And I think pretty much the 5 that I wrote down were on all the responses as far as, most people's ideas. I think I was pretty in line with what most people are also thinking with this team. So Grayson, defending Big 12 champions, they're back out there now. One of the things I mentioned in my article is they're not going to sneak up on anybody this time. I mean, they're squarely on everybody's radar. Dave Aranda and company got a lot back from last year's team, but they're also losing a lot of leadership, a lot of starters on defense in particular. But in my maneuvering around throughout this offseason, I mean, you can see where it might not be so bad replacing a lot of these guys, even if there is a little bit of a growing pain just because of Jalen Petre's been around for 17 years at this point. It's just you don't plug and play a guy who's been a starter that long. But your thoughts as they kick off spring drills here today and last over, the next month or so?
Yeah, it's going to be a really interesting time. I mean, every year is very interesting for spring football, just the storylines and the things that come out of spring football and kind of the things that everyone's looking for. And I think spring ball is really important for young guys. They have to find, their footing, right? And in this new level of football where the game is so much faster and just trying to figure out, where they fit in this Baylor offense and defense as well. So I'm looking forward to see the young guys, of course. The wide receivers, I think, is a position that I'm very focused on just because it's so young and unproven. And even the older guys are just completely unproven at this point. So that's going to be a position that I think is going to take up a lot of the headlines. Running back as well, because we know how important that position was last year for Jeff Grimes in this wide zone scheme. And, they kind of got a blessing with having Abram Smith and Treston Ebner, 2 veteran guys who not only provide leadership, but were also really, really good football players who physically were ready to go out of the gates. And now they're trying to figure out, is Tay McWilliams the guy? Is Jordan Jenkins a guy who could be, a very big-time threat in just his second year? Where does Squirrel fit in? Is Josh Fleeks going to be a big, ball carrier now? And remember, he practiced at running back last year as well during spring at times. So where does he fit in this offense as well? Very intrigued by that. I think the young guys at tight end are going to be intriguing. Who's going to fill in for that leftover offensive line spot? With Xavier Newman-Johnson leaving, will that be Micah Maskua, Gavin Byers? Could a young guy pop up like a Tate Williams? Lots of questions on the offensive side that I'm very intrigued just to go out there and just see these guys perform.
Yeah, I limited it to 5 storylines, but I could have gone farther to like 8 or 9 or 10 probably, and I didn't include the offensive line just because I only had 5, and more of the focus is on running back and wide receiver because there's like no knowns right there basically on either position right now. But yeah, there is a starting offensive line spot, and one that I left off that I just figured I'll get around to writing about it as we go on is just, how does the offensive line get better? I mean, you don't just go, okay, well, they did that last year, so that's automatically going to be what they are this year and so on. Like, no, they got to, replicate and in turn still get better. And then probably even a lot better because of the fact that there is no Abram Smith. So, you don't even know who the running back is going to be just yet. So, yeah, that is a question mark. Obviously, there's a quarterback competition. How healthy is Blake Shapen? We don't even know that yet. We need a roster just to know who's even on this team at this point because, I'm doing this review of just putting, these loose grades on the position groups. And I was going to send in tight ends today because I'm wrapping it up. I've only got 3 of them left. But then I was going through and I'm like, you know what? Is Christoph Henley on this team? And it's yeah, he's on last year's roster. You know how many games he was apparently in? 0.
Yeah.
So now I stopped writing the article because I'm like, I don't even know who's on the team. And particularly for the tight ends, wide receivers, running backs, and quarterbacks, which is what I have left and what I'm hoping to finish in these next few days, I kind of need to see a roster first to even really preview it because is Christoph Henley on the team still? Is he going to be in the mix? If so, and even if not, the tight end room looks really good, potentially, with what they've got coming in and what they've got returning. But yeah, is Josh Fleeks listed as a running back? Is that where he's going full bore? Who else is maybe on that? Quarterbacks, is Blake Shapen healthy? There's a lot of questions with these offensive skill guys. I realized as I got to the end of this thing that I'm looking forward to getting a roster today just to kind of get some of those questions answered.
Yeah, and I think the roster is going to be a big thing, too, because I do think there will be some more guys missing from the roster than probably expected.
Or moved or whatever.
Moved, yeah, new position, new heights and weights as well. That's big because, frankly, you have to be a certain size if you're going to play on the offensive line for this Baylor, for this staff. You got to be a certain size if you're even going to get a shot. So very intrigued by that as well. Moving on to the defensive side, I think the defensive line, I don't really need to say much about because we know they're going to be really good. The only question I have is how good is Jackson Player and who's starting? Who are the starting 3? And is Gabe Hall healthy? That's it. Those are the questions I need answered because if Gabe Hall is healthy, I think he is probably their best NFL prospect on the defensive line. Him and Apu are kind of right there next to each other. The only problem with Apu is he's got to go to a specific scheme at the NFL level. So I'm really intrigued by that, I guess, on the defensive line, but we know they're going to be good. But my main questions are everywhere else. You got Dylan Doyle, you got Al Walcott, but the other positions are fairly up for grabs. Christian Morgan is probably solidified at one of those safety spots. Is he going to be moved? Are they going to put him at the star? Is he going to stay at the boundary? Is Lorando, Johnson ready to play the star spot? Is he ready to be a starter for this team? Who's going to play field safety? Is Devin Neal going to move to the boundary, or is he going to be the starter at field, or is one of these young guys, Devin Lemire, Cisco Castan, Romario Noel, are they going to take over one of those safety spots? So a lot of questions there. Ronnie Wheat, I think, has his hands full a little bit with just kind of putting guys in the right position because that's going to be so important going into next season when you lose guys like JT Woods and Jalen Petrie. They're hard to replace. It's very hard to replace guys like that.
Yep, and I ran down a lot of that in that article because, I think those are all the big questions is exactly what you just said, and those are pretty much the main ones. Is linebacker and secondary, a lot to wonder about there. Can the offensive line keep doing what they were doing? Who's the quarterback? What's the quarterback status as far as Shapen's health? There's a lot to learn about just on this first day. Who's on the team still? Who's no longer on the team? Who's moved positions?
That's a big one, I think, for the secondary as well, because they're trying to figure out safety. They're trying to figure out cornerback. But I could see a world where a cornerback moves to safety and maybe tries out that as they try to build some depth there and figure out who the starter will be. So I think that's going to be huge for the secondary, figuring out exactly where guys fit in at this point in their careers. Also at linebacker, I'm just very intrigued by seeing who's going to play that will spot. I think Tyrone Brown, he would be the guy that I would pick as of today, but Will Williams has a very high athletic ceiling. I think Brooks Miller is going to be a big-time player at Baylor if he can stay healthy. So lots of questions at that other spot opposite Dylan Doyle.
Yeah, there is. So that's what spring ball is for, is to get questions answered as best as you can, and the ones that you can't, you go fix them through the transfer portal or through a new hire or change, just in general somehow or another. And last year, we saw them get about halfway through spring ball before realizing we don't have a running back. We don't have a running back that's going to be able to carry the load for us next year. And you know what? They might not still have that. We have no idea. Can Tay McWilliams be an every down type of a guy? Or can Jordan Jenkins? Or can someone else on that roster? And, you know, for those guys who do work out, like, where does that leave Squirrel Williams? I mean, how does he fit into this picture at all? How does, you know, Jonah White fit into this picture? I mean, there's a lot to wonder about with this team right now in a good way. You know, like, hey, there's not a game anytime soon, and, you know, they're not having to completely rebuild this thing, but there are a lot of curious questions as we enter spring ball that we'll get to talk about over the course of the next month. And today we'll get to hear from Dave Aranda for the first time since the Sugar Bowl, basically. So that'll be nice to just hear what he's got to say after all of the changes and you know, everything that's taken place these last few weeks since New Orleans. What else do you have, if anything, on spring ball and just, you know, it being here starting today?
Yeah, I mean, those are kind of the main things. I'm just intrigued by kind of just going out there and seeing what practice looks like, seeing the new coaches. I think that's big. Ronnie Wheat, Dallas Baker, seeing how they coach, their style, their philosophy, and just honestly seeing the growth, you know, that these guys have made with Vic Valoria in the weight room. I know last year during spring ball, I think we went out there and we were just like, man, these guys look really physically imposing. They look good. And when fall camp came around, it was like, man, this is a big team. This is a team that looks like they're going to be able to out-physical a whole lot of teams in the Big 12, and they did that. I want to see those same gains for some of those young guys, you know, so that they can catch up to the older guys. I think that's going to be really important because we know we gave tons of credit to Vic Valoria during the season because we saw it, right? We saw people moving other teams every single week, and that's a product of what you do in the offseason. And so I think Vic Valoria, his staff, they deserve a lot of credit, and I really want to go out there and be able to see that again because I felt like that was just such a big storyline coming out of last year's fall camp and throughout the offseason.
And if you want to read up more on spring football previews and just discussion, head on over to the website, Sic'Em365.com, and there's plenty of talk already on spring football and articles about various topics having to do with spring football. So definitely check that out. And anything before we get into the mailbag here?
I don't think so. We got a lot of questions this week.
All right. From Mikey, first, thanks for the great job y'all do the podcast every week. Been a listener since day one. Thanks, Mikey. A few questions. 1A, when Coach Grimes decides to leave, do you foresee us trying to keep this RVO offense, possibly promoting within or hire best available outside?
I think it depends when he leaves and kind of who he takes with him. I think those are the two biggest questions. I do think they'll probably try to keep it just because it's been such a focal point for this team. And truthfully, I do think that it'll probably be Sean Bell or Eric Mateos whenever that time does come for Grimes to leave. And I could see a situation where they're co-offensive coordinators and Sean Bell's the passing game coordinator and Eric Mateos is the run game coordinator. That would actually be a very nice fit, I think, for Baylor. And in that case, yes, they would keep that offense.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't given him much thought until there's some scuttlebutt to believe he's on his way out. I mean, that's when I'll really start to think about it, but I guess you got to be, you know, ahead of the curve. And so, yeah, that would seem like a good option, but tell you what, the Big 12 offenses are not going to be any joke this year. It's going to be a big departure from last year. I mean, think about what's happened. Quinn Ewers goes to Texas and joins up with Sark. You got Bijan and Xavier Worthy there with him, and you spent millions of dollars on an offensive line, even if they are too young at the moment. Oklahoma went and hired Jeff Lebby to run the old Baylor offense, and they brought in Dylan Gabriel, his old slinger from UCF. You've got West Virginia hiring Graham Harrell in the air raid. You've got Texas Tech going Zach Kitley in a Western Kentucky offense that just broke NCAA records. Now, granted, he did not bring his quarterback with him, thankfully, but he brought a couple of his offensive linemen with him. They don't score low in points. They're not grinded out. That is very much a score a bunch of points offense. TCU's now got Sonny Dykes running the show up there, so you know that they're going to have an offense. I mean, just and so on and so on. Like every single move that I just mentioned for half the league is all basically going closer back towards the old Big 12 offenses and way of doing things, almost air raid, not entirely, but close to it. So this is going to be very interesting. I don't think you're going to be able to afford an offense that can just rely on its defense all the time. I think you're going to have an offense that can score some freaking points this year.
Yeah, I mean, that's true, but you're also talking about, for a lot of those, not all of them, Brent Venables, they're going to play defense at Oklahoma for sure, but some of those other places are going to play zero defense.
Yeah.
And you're going to be able to run the ball all over them the entire game because it's a new scheme. You're trying to come in and throw the ball 50 times. And, well, what happens when you throw the ball 50 times and you don't have a defense? Well, you're going to lose a lot of games. And so I'm very curious to see how that plays out. I know the offenses might have the propensity to score more points, but I think what I've seen in this league and what we've seen over the past few years is you have to be able to have players on both sides of the ball. You have to be able to play defense, and you got to be able to run the football, because if you can't do those two things, it's going to be very, very tough for you to win games. So, yeah, Baylor's going to have to score, but I also think they're set up very nicely as these coaches come in their first year and they're trying to figure things out with the guys that they have. It's going to be very interesting, I think.
I'll just say this in regards to that. I agree with you. They're going to be able to play defense and run, but if you're starting to face these offenses that, just like in the day, could put you down 21-0 if you come and you step off the bus the wrong way, that's where I would have some concerns, because can you, if you get down like that, grind out and pull out wins? Because we know the old ways you could, because you could go score 40 points in 5 minutes. But with this team, if you do dig yourself a hole, can you throw yourself out of that?
It's a TCU game, and they didn't.
Exactly.
This past year.
Exactly.
No, for sure. Yeah.
I mean, there's going to be only better offenses this year. I mean, across the board.
Yeah, and they're going to be in a situation where they're down.
Yes.
Like, don't kid yourself. It's going to happen. They're going to have to make throws. So I do agree with you there, but there will also be games where the other team's offense doesn't show up and Baylor hangs 50 on them, and it's I do think both sides will happen this year.
1B, if the latter, is there still good reason to revamp our running back room? If, again, on Grimes leaving, I mean, he might leave sooner rather than later. I saw mention of possibly taking multiple running backs in 2023 and some attrition to the running back room, even though we have a lot of talent. Maybe most of it doesn't fit the Abram Smith role. Seems silly to lose great talent if it could possibly be better used in a different system.
I guess I'm a little bit confused on...
Is there still good reason to revamp our running back room if Grimes leaves sooner rather than later? He's not gone, though. That's the thing is...
and I don't think they're revamping by taking 2 running backs.
No.
I just think that they see a need for more depth.
I mean, this is like a 20... I mean, all due respect, Mikey. I mean, it's like a 2023 question. We're starting spring ball 22 today. So, I mean, I have no idea.
And I think the bigger thing is that Baylor doesn't know yet.
Yeah.
Because they're all so young. So I think at this point, they still need to see Jordan Jenkins go out there, get the ball 25 times and not fumble the football.
Right.
They still need Tay McWilliams. Can he actually handle 25 carries in a game? I don't think they have an answer for that quite yet. And so I do think that's a reason why they're going to continue to build that room. And I do think there could be attrition as well. That happens everywhere. Some of those guys are getting older. We'll see what happens. But I do think if you look in the room, there are a couple guys that fit the scheme really well. And there are a couple guys that are very dynamic that maybe don't fit the scheme, that maybe you need to move around in the offense a little bit. Maybe Squirrel needs to play some slot. Maybe he needs to get some of those Monterey Baldwin touches on those sweeps and stuff, and maybe not run it up the middle, all the time where he's been getting hurt so often.
Yeah, and I guess the general gist here is him talking about the styles of these running backs, and by the end saying it seems silly to lose great talent if it could be used better in a different system. But again, that goes back to Grimes and leaving, and he's not gone, right. And I don't know about 2023 because, again, this is the first day of spring 2022. So, that's a question better reserved for when there's an actual rumor that he's leaving, or towards the end of the season when some guys maybe have left. But right now, no idea. I think that's part of what they're trying to figure out is who's in, who's out, and who works and who doesn't.
Do they need to go get a transfer?
Yeah. Who on the roster seems most ready to take the Abram Smith role for the 22 season?
I think, okay, so this is going to be
nobody.
Yeah, this is not going to be a very simple answer. There's no one that I'm sitting here going, okay, he's going to go out and break Baylor's single season rushing record like Abram did. But I think if you look at, I think that Jordan Jenkins fits the role the best, but I think Tay McWilliams is the most ready to step into that role, if that makes the most sense. I think if you look at Jordan Jenkins, you go, okay, that is definitely a guy that at some point in his career, he's going to be able to run like Abram did, except probably faster and possibly better. Tay McWilliams just looks like a man on a mission from what we saw this last year, and he just looks the most physically ready for this style of football. So those are the two guys. I don't think either one's going to break the Baylor single season record, but the role, as far as the role goes, I think they could split that role and then have someone maybe like Squirrel come in and fill maybe a Treston Ebner type role, or even Josh Fleeks, who might be moved there.
Can our assistant coaches that are earning head coaching gigs go coach outside of Texas in the Big 12? I want to root for them, but hard when we will be conference foes.
I mean, they can, but a lot probably don't want to because it's what they're familiar with, right? I mean, if you're familiar with coaching in the Big 12, that probably gives you the best chance to win games when you're so familiar with the other staffs, the other styles in the league.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, it's kind of frustrating, like swagger jacking, which is kind of what it feels like. In Tech's case, they want to like reform the rule, methodology or system, but with McGuire's own twist on it. And yeah, now K-State will want to do the whole culture of joy thing, but with Jerome Tang's own twist. But hey, that's what happens, guys.
Will they though? Will they start saying that? You think promoting that like Baylor had? I don't know.
I mean, the we'll mindset will be the same.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think we're not going to see like single digits in Lubbock this year. And I've already seen like a couple videos that are basically what we watched. And I'm not even, what we watched 3 years ago. So it's kind of, feels similar. So I don't know. I would expect Jerome Tang's going to have some similarities that we'll see. But no, I would hope he doesn't go run with the whole culture of joy thing. But then again, like he's a part of it. So I don't know. But yeah, I don't like swagger jacking, and I would hope that, and I assume he's going to have his own twist on everything and all that. But it is weird. It is weird to kind of see the same things you rooted for going and being planted somewhere else so close to home for sure. And it'll just be weird seeing Drew have to go up against Tang twice a year now, if not 3 times. But I do wish him very, very well. Scott, and thank you for the questions, Mikey. And we'll have to figure out the running back room, man. I mean, that'll be something to ask in a couple weeks, in a month, more so than today. But there are some questions there, no doubt. Scotty B, buy or sell James Akinjo comes back to men's basketball next season?
Buy. I'm going to buy it for now.
All right.
I just think he's got more to prove. I mean, I don't think he's getting drafted. So I don't know, go play in Europe maybe? Is that better than coming back and trying to win a national championship? I don't think so.
Yeah, I'll say buy for right now as well. But I don't feel wholly confident in that. I really just a shot in the dark, quite frankly, for him. But I'll say buy, but nothing really to base that on. Which areas are you anxious to see on offense and defense in terms of question marks during spring football practices? For me, it would be pass offense, consistent quarterback play, and on defense, I would say pass defense. I wrote a whole article about it. If you want my thoughts, I don't want to have to keep repeating it, but I hit on those as well. You?
Yeah, I mean, I think QB play is definitely intriguing to me. It needs to be better. And I know people are going to defend Gary's Sugar Bowl performance, that he wasn't healthy or whatnot. I mean, but the problem is it was the same thing that plagued him at times during the season. Late seeing things, late on throws, throwing interception, turning the ball over.
Just no touch.
No touch on his throws downfield. Missing receivers that are open. And the hamstring might have hindered him, but the processing part, that has nothing to do with your hamstring. That just doesn't. And it was a month and a week removed from that. So I don't know. I need to see that and also see if Shapen's going to be healthy enough to be a feasible quarterback option, going into the fall. I think he'll be fine in the spring, but I don't know that they'll put everything on his plate this spring. I think they might take it easy with him. So I'm anxious about that for sure. I think defensively, I'm really curious about the secondary. I need to see more options emerge. I need to see more playmaking emerge. And I also need to see who's going to take over Jalen Petre's spot, because that, and honestly, Terrell Bernard as well, because those two were so dang good this year. It's going to be very hard to replace them. And I should mention JT Woods also, because he was fantastic as well.
Yeah, I mean, those are the main ones right there. The passing game on both sides is a big question mark that they're going to have to address and figure out. They got to be more consistent in the passing game. May have to be. And they're not going to be able to just rely on lining up and running Abram for, first downs. Here's Ebner, back to Abram, little chunk pass to Sims. They're going to have to open it up a bit more this year on offense, in my opinion. And to do that, you're going to have to be able to throw it around. And they've got a great group of tight ends. They've got a lot of options at the other skill spots, but a lot of unknown at the moment. So that's definitely a question, and agree on the pass defense as well. Darth Mellon, thoughts on where this year's men's team would finish in the NCAA tourney without the injuries to LJ and JTT?
It's just
at least a Sweet 16, right?
Yeah. Oh, for sure they would have beaten North Carolina. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. They definitely would have beaten them. This next round against UCLA, I mean, UCLA's solid, and then they would have had to play Purdue.
God, they'd be in the Final Four, dude.
I think they could be as well. I mean, I don't. The Purdue one, I still
Purdue
think
is
would
too
be a
slow.
challenge.
Purdue.
They are, but they could score with Baylor. That's the thing, and Baylor has no answer for what they have down low. I mean, we just saw Texas just get. I mean, Texas couldn't. There was nothing they could do. It was either foul or give up a layup the whole game. But if you have John, maybe that helps. But again, John's not to me, John's not an elite on the block defender. He's an elite, when you get him out in space against a guard, he can hold up. I think they probably would have gotten by Purdue, and then in the Final Four, they would have played probably Gonzaga or Duke, and that. I don't know that they beat those teams. I think they could have made it back to the Final Four. I probably would have picked them to be in the Final Four, but I don't think they would have gone back-to-back.
I'd say they go at least Elite Eight, which is a tough pill to swallow because, just a little bit better of a first half, and you're possibly – well, you're definitely playing in the Sweet 16 this weekend and maybe even playing another weekend after this, which would have been pretty cool. But, that's where I kind of fit. I'd say Elite Eight-ish would be my pick.
Didn't fall right for them this year. It's just so tough to look back on how good they were to start the year. It's tough.
C. Minus also asks, what NBA team would you like to see Sohan and Brown on next year?
I think I'd love to see both on the Spurs. Spurs have 3 first-round picks. That'd be fun. And I think they fit, like Sohan fits the Spurs culture for sure, being a foreign player. And the Spurs have done so good with foreign guys. And I think he fits their scheme pretty well too. And I think Brown with Chip England, I mean, that's another Kawhi situation where you go, man, if he could just find a jump shot, well, Chip England's a pretty good guy to mold that. So the Spurs are my favorite team. That's kind of a biased answer. I also think both would fit really well in any system that really favors a scheme that is not, going back in history where you have, a solidified power forward and a solidified center. These guys need to go to a place where they're playing, 4 out, 1 in. I think that fits their games much, much better. Just my thoughts on that.
Yeah, I'm not a huge NBA guy in terms of being able to answer your question. Where they would be good fits and where, they might thrive the most. I mean, I was bummed when Sacramento drafted Davion, and yet he's playing his best ball right now and is doing really well for himself. So I'm just excited to see these guys get the opportunity. I'm curious to see where they land, and I just hope that, like, especially in regards to your question, that wherever they do land, it is a fit. It's not, a square peg round hole situation, because we've seen that with some of the football draft picks where it's like you're almost screwed right out of the gate, or it at least costs you a little bit of your early career or opportunity. So good news is they should have some flavor in the NBA draft for us to discuss here in a few months. But the question is, how many guys are we talking about? Because again, that goes back to the roster and the fact that there's some decisions that need to be made. And those are 2 candidates that would, obviously line up with being some potential draft picks here in the next few months.
What I really need is for both of them to slip a little bit. I don't want them to go in the top 5 where you're just going to just a terrible situation.
Yeah.
I'm hoping that they're in that late lottery. That seems to be a really nice fit for guys, where you can go to a pretty good team that is just missing a couple pieces. I think they both would fit that really well, but Jeremy Sohan is just flying up boards. People just love him because he's so versatile and can play defense, can shoot a little bit. He's a very good prospect, and people are really falling in love with him right now.
It's a good thing North Carolina fans aren't GMs, because they'd let him go undrafted and just say he's a dirty player, because North Carolina's never done anything like that. They just they're one of those blue bloods. They just protect the game and do everything the right way.
Brady Manick is just such a classy
never
guy.
Done anything wrong. C. Midness, okay,
He's
answer
got
that
one
over.
more. Yeah, the top one.
Which position group will make the biggest jump during spring practice?
I'm going to go with the wide receiver position. I think they're going to have to, and I think they will. I think they're going to be much further along than we think at the end of spring.
I don't know. Sure, wide receivers. I mean, I don't know. I'm going over the same groups in my head, and I don't have one reason to really single out one more so than the others, quite frankly. They all have huge question marks. So, and heck, it might be a group that doesn't even really need to improve that much compared to the others. It might be like the offensive line, and they're as set as anybody. So, yeah, I don't know, but I'd be more than glad to answer that question on who actually did at the end of it. But, I mean, it's anybody's guess at this point. So, wide receiver seems like a fair assumption. Just views like Jacob Zeno did in the fall. Do we lose another quarterback to the portal following spring ball?
Well, I mean, he didn't even go into the portal till mid-season.
Yeah.
So I think it's, that was later down the line. I think they have 3 quarterbacks, right?
The fact that they didn't bring somebody in means probably no, because they got to have 3 quarterbacks.
I would think so. I think there's always a risk when you have a third quarterback that is very talented. There's always a risk, but I think right now, I think they'll be okay following spring ball this offseason. When Austin Novosad joins the fold in December, that's where things will get a little interesting to figure out kind of who fits in where. Does Gary come back for another season? That's when things are going to get very interesting in the quarterback room.
Yeah, and we're probably nowhere close to figuring out who the starter is even going to be. Because, again, we don't even know if Blake Shapen's available to really fully participate. Gary wasn't fully healthy last time we saw him. But, yeah, I would think that the quarterback room – Kyron Drones saw like a couple of key snaps last year, even if they were just snapping the ball. So I think he's got to know that, I'm sure he's wanting to see the field soon. But he's still he's still young. Yeah. And, there is something to be said for waiting your turn. And I think if you're him, you got to realize, you got 2 injury-prone quarterbacks in front of you. These 2 barely made it through the full season last year. You were this close to playing multiple occasions, especially towards the end. So I would just have that in mind if I was him. I'm not trying to throw a recruiting pitch, but just saying, if you're the third quarterback on this team, that does not mean you're, across the world in terms of playing time. You're right there potentially given what we saw last year.
Right, and there's a chance he's the most talented.
And he might be the second stringer. We don't know, yeah.
Right, and he really just needs that light bulb to flip on. It just he wasn't ready last year to really handle a workload where they actually said, okay, if the 2 guys in front of him get hurt, he'll be a feasible option. He really wasn't that last year. He came in and snapped the ball, but I don't think there was a ton of confidence in that. I think this is going to be a massive spring for him to get to the point where he goes, okay, if I get my opportunity, I'm going to run with it and be really, really good at it, kind of like Blake Shapen did when Gary got hurt.
Yeah, exactly. So we will see with the quarterbacks exactly how they're lined up, in terms of who's fully participating and all of that. And, it's a 3-man group that's going to be working for starting playing time here over the next few weeks. Bear Coog, first question, should Zach Loveday look to transfer? I know he loves Baylor, etc., which might be why he stays, but the dude doesn't get a lot of playing time, and when he does, it almost looks as if he doesn't fit our scheme. Thoughts here?
I'm not going to tell anyone they should look to transfer, but I don't necessarily see him having a big role on this team. I think that Flo Thamba, if he comes back, if Flo doesn't come back, they're going to bring in someone. They're not going to run with just Josh O and Zach Loveday as your bigs next year. I think that if he wants playing time for next season, he might have to, because I think Baylor's kind of recruiting guys that fit the NBA mold. When you think about Flo next year, maybe. You got Josh O, who I think is going to be an NBA player. You got Everyday John, who will be back, if not at the end of next year, maybe the next year. So they got a lot of talent there, and I don't know if he really fits what they're trying to do, especially on the defensive end. I just don't know if he's quick enough to really cover the guards like they need him to be able to do.
Second question from Bear Coog, and this will close us out this week. Do you feel like the Baylor-Tech rivalry is heating up more than ever before on and off the field? Do you think we could possibly see this new spark on the field in the fall? I've never seen it like this, and I am from the West Texas area, and it seems like we are living rent-free in their heads. Just seems like they are jealous of our success.
I always thought it was a really good rivalry. When they were playing up in Arlington, that was a lot of fun. Those games definitely got chippy, those shootouts. But, there's a coach there that was just coaching at Baylor for 4 years. So, I think it's definitely very different than it was before. They have a coaching staff with a lot of guys that were at Baylor. And so, I think that could add some fuel to the fire. I don't know how much it will on the Baylor side of things. But, maybe. I think definitely for fans, it's going to heat up a little bit, and definitely on the Tech side, it's heated up. I just don't know that Baylor has any hatred towards Tech. I don't think Tech really does towards Baylor, but maybe they do. Okay, well, if they do, then there you go. But on the Baylor side, I don't know that Baylor hates Tech. I don't know. Maybe they do now. Maybe. That's possible.
I think they're going to be given a lot of reasons to here pretty soon, and I won't necessarily have to do anything with winning. I just think it's going to be kind of the attitude that emanates from there. It is very different, and, Tech takes pride in kind of being then don't give a you-know-what type of fan base, which I can respect to an extent. There's part of it's just kind of like, cool, you want to be a jerk and like, pride yourself on that kind of, like the dirty fan kind of a deal. But yeah, I mean, there's a segment of that fan base that is just really the ones that I'm talking about is that are really the vulgar, like dirty, just say the most vile things possible kind of fans. And then there's some that I think are just like everybody else, but maybe you're catching some of those more vocal ones. I think mostly though, it's just, there's a lot of Tech fans because it's a big school, and I think the most thing is that there's a bit of jealousy there for the success that Baylor's had over the last few years. I think Tech's had some of their own, particularly in basketball, and they'll be the first to tell you that they won the 2 meetings in the regular season this year, but I don't think that they enjoyed watching Baylor go win a national championship 2 years after they failed to do so. And I don't think they enjoyed watching Baylor go win a Big 12 football championship with, like their third coach in the last 6 years. And Tech has not managed to do it but one time, and that was over 10 years ago, and it was a 3-way tie. So, yeah, I think it's tough for them to have kind of just been sort of sitting there in the middle of the road football-wise, and they think Baylor's dead and out of the way, and they're not only back, but they're above us again, and then basketball, like I mentioned, like here they are, and they actually went a step further than we did, and so Tech's got a lot of good things going right now. I mean, with Mark Adams, they're right in the mix for a title this year, and Joey McGuire obviously is going to bring the energy and get them excited, if anything else, and I'm sure he'll put a good football product out there. So I think that they are hungry for winning, overdue probably in their minds, a bit ticked off seeing teams like Baylor go and win what they feel like should be theirs. And I think rejuvenated by, some new blood that's in there as well. I think it's a combination of those things. And, and the fact too that look, OU and Texas aren't going to be, in the conference that much longer. It's going to be a couple more years when you start looking at rivalries. I mean, Baylor-Oklahoma State could be a great one, but Baylor and Texas Tech could very well lead the way as well in the new Big 12.
Yeah, Baylor-TCU also, that's another one that's interesting. But yeah, I mean, there's going to be a lot more talk about this rivalry right now because of, like you said, the Joey McGuire thing. I know they're upset.
They're undefeated over there right now, right? I mean, he's not lost a game yet. Yeah. So
Matt Wells didn't lose a game either when he first
and I'm not bagging on Joey, just to be clear. I'm more bagging on the fan base. It's just like, and not even bagging on him. It's just that there's going to be a lot of talk right now because there's no reason to stop the talk. There's no games coming up. So just like when Matt Rule was hired at Baylor, although it was a different circumstance, every commit was a big deal. Every hire was a big deal. Every change, single digits, everything was a big deal because everybody was so starved for just something positive, and that's what you're watching unfold with Joey and Tech. Is that they're eating it up because they've been starving for it. You know what I'm saying? And I don't blame them one bit because it's what you see look at Oklahoma fans right now with Venables. You would think Lincoln Riley was the worst head coach of all time based on how, I can't believe, Brent's just the way this everything's cool, fun, new, and I think that's what we're seeing in Lubbock right now. So it's leading to a little bit of trash talk plus the success in basketball too. So I think that has a lot to do with it. And all that being said, a lot of reasons why that could end up being, a big-time rivalry as you're, kind of hinting towards there from here on out, especially in the new Big 12. So thank you for the question from Bear Coog, as well as Just Views, C. Mitness, Mikey, Darth Millen, Scotty, and everybody else listening to the podcast this week. We do appreciate your time as always. And Grayson, anything before we go?
No, nothing really. Exciting time. Spring practice coming up. Sad the basketball season's over, but we're going to have plenty to talk about as the week kind of unfolds. And next week, just spring football's here. Football season is right around the corner.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is. Basketball season Well, we'll have plenty to talk about, that's for sure. Even though the season's ended, a lot to watch for in terms of rosters and just movement and retooling and things like that for both the men and the women. But yeah, football joining the spring sports and very much back on the radar starting today. So stay tuned to the website for a lot of news and notes from practices and from Dave Aranda and other press conferences, and of course, just general chatter as well. But do appreciate everybody out there for listening. Thanks to Armstrong and Jack behind the scenes as well. And thanks to Grayson Grunhafer. I'm Craig Smoke. This has been the Bearcast on Sic'Em365.com.